Welcome, everybody. I am Pato, and I'm here today to talk about a simple, maybe not so simple question I threw up on the Facebook group the other day, which was, what do you believe are the top three most powerful non-capped models of the game, and why? And this is a really interesting and fun question because it's very subjective. I mean, there's a lot of opinions. What is power in Guild Ball? And maybe I'll talk myself out of this partway through, explaining my reasoning for what my top three most powerful models are. But I learned a lot from you guys, seeing what your reasoning and kind of what you view as powerful. I'm gonna go through mine, and at the end, maybe we'll both have learned something. So let's look at the first category that I like to. Of these guys, a lot of them, most of the votes were for strikers, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have people like Flint here, who's great. I mean, he has super shot, he has where they go, momentous tackle, momentous push dodge, momentous where they go on a hit result, close control, charmed mail, 14 hit boxes, which average for strikers about 12. So great. What else? What more could you want out of a striker than Flint? He's like the striker's striker. You look at the other top most voted one, it was Vitriol, and Vitriol, much more attack focused, with the 2-inch reach and the shadows. It doesn't have the where they go dodge, but has other ways of getting the mobility, similar threat range. And the reason why I actually don't have any strikers in my top three is because when I think of what is the most powerful models to me, it tends to be models that are the X factor, the difference. Like if we both line up, what are the models that are going to give me an advantage and you potentially take it away from you? And in most cases, most guilds have a striker. Everybody has there's similar threat ranges. They do similar things. I mean, a few of them are a little bit more offensive. A few of them are just purely strikers, and there's very few in between. And that's just kind of how they go. And I feel like I don't, when I take a Vitriol, when I take a Flint, if we both have one, we're kind of at the same power level. And I find that they don't necessarily get you ahead. And I understand why they're sexy, right? Because they give you those 4 victory points. For new players, it's a much easier way to win the game than try to grind it out with kills. Usually, if you start that way, it'll be like a little bit nickel and diming, and the more experienced players will outmaneuver you, that kind of stuff. So strikers are usually what get you on the board early, and are the more exciting models. And the next category of the guys that are up here, like I call, is frontliners. And so frontliners, they're the offensive guys. They're like, they're your boars, right? Boar gets a vote in there, the chopping machine, and he's very damage focused. And then you have guys like Brick, who's like a very lovable guy, has his countercharge zone, doesn't require a lot of influence, gives you a lot of influence for a big guy, great kind of control. And then you have one of the kings of resource control, which is Gast. And Gast actually really stands out because he doesn't necessarily do the damage. I mean, he can do damage. He can actually do a lot of AoE damage and that kind of stuff. He's not necessarily as focused as Boar, but because of fear and rising anger, his tankiness is very different. Where a lot of those other guys, it's like, okay, I have tough hide or some regeneration mechanic. Gast is just like, he eats your influence to start the conversation. He has great counterattacks, and he even, once you damage him, he generates free momentum that you can use to do the counterattacks, and has a great playbook. So he's actually one of the really strong frontliners that would creep up towards that next tier level. But in most cases, frontliners don't make it for me because they do have a lot of them have a few drawbacks in the fact that they are low defense. Even though Gas has 200 hit points, once you get past the fear and the counterattack, he melts really, really quickly. So it's always really interesting to me, necessarily, like if these guys could actually be in the top power levels. And some of them are very, very good. Like Gas is up there. There are some that might creep into at the end when we're done talking about this. But mostly, frontliners aren't the guys that are going to do it for me either. So then you have the next category of players up there, which in my opinion is like, those are like the Rages. And if I think of Rage, he's a good example of what a DPS character is. And so that the DPS range, those are the fun guys that you get to wipe people off the board with. Rage is like, he has a job, he does it very, very well. He's furious, he's influence efficient because of that. He has tooled up in case you have no targets to get to, and he makes someone else do more damage. Momentum all through his playbook. If he damages you, gets another free swing, can get 4 attacks for 1 influence if he gets to go off, which is amazing. He's very focused, but you do have inefficiencies. You do have, he's a little bit slower. He only has 1-inch reach. He can't 2-6 kick, not super great. 4-0 armor, slightly below average. Like he'll fall apart pretty quickly, even with his 17 hit points, if you can get to him. So that's kind of his deficiency there. And you look at other, Alchemist players or actually not Alchemist players. Let's go to Hunter players. Actually, Jakar. He's the big new guy on the block. It's like, oh, dude, this guy's so cool. He goes in, he backs to the shadows, anatomical precision. He dices people up. And Jakar is really good, very fast, 1-inch melee. Doesn't really kick. Again, not very good defensive stats. Only 14 hit points. And even though he has the end of activation stuff, the other thing he suffers from is he actually suffers from counterattacks. It's not so much that he can't get away if you're going to counterattack, but it's hard for him to stick to certain models. Like we go back to Gas, he has a 2-inch push on 2. Jakar comes up and attacks him. He just counterattacks, pushes him 2 inches away, and then fights over. Jakar, whatever influence is left on him, it's done. So there are some deficiencies in him. However, we do have the most voted model, which is Gutter. And this is where we start to see like, okay, one of those striker, frontliner, DPS characters start to ascend, right? Because let's talk about the trade-off. She's fast, so check, not weak there. 3-6 kick average. 3-6 kick's actually pretty good. You can feel comfortable passing the ball around with a 3-6 kick. I would. Defense 4+1 armor, slightly above average there. 4-0's the norm. 4-1's actually pretty good. Gives you the 2 influence, 2-inch melee. That's awesome stats. And then you have stuff that makes her good, at dealing damage, right? You have anatomical precision, get a little bit of health back when you damage, scything blow for the AoE damage. I mean, this is all looking amazing. Like, there's no drawback to Gutter. But the thing, like I was talking about earlier, the X factor, the thing that makes me go, okay, this model gives me an advantage by having it on the board, chain grab, because your opponent now has to play a different game. They have to play more careful. You can easily go and just pull someone out where they didn't want to be, usually models that are done with their activation already, so they can't really defend themselves. Pull them in, do some damage. Now your other guys are in range to come in, you isolate them. Those are the kind of plays that I feel are kind of those X factors that push those characters into super power level. Beyond the fact that she has great stats and she's like really not deficient anywhere, here you go. You got your X factor, and Gutter makes it in my top 3, definitely for sure. So there is one other category and kind of that leads towards those X factors, and the other one that brought up a model that I can think of that's purely this is Silence, like a control character. And the way I view control is, just messing with your opponent's actions. It's kind of what Morticians are, right? And part of maybe why I've gravitated towards that faction. But tucked shutout, you can lock down your opponents, mess with their actions. You can kind of get a pseudo-linked by tucking a model that either doesn't have influence or is already knocked down, and they won't be able to generate the momentum to stand them back up if you're going first, or you shut out that Ox or the Theron or whatever the tappers, that want to go first. Nope, can't do that. Your end of turn activation. Sorry, buddy. 2 momentous damage on 2, so he can generate his own momentum to bonus time his tucked and shutouts if you want to. Embalming fluid for mobility control. He has creation to keep you activation advantage. And the thing that actually pushes him into the top tier again, the X factor of all of this. I mean, he's slow. That's probably his own deficiency, but he generates 3 influence, which is the most of any model that's not a captain. And without some other thing like I have to within 4 inches, it's just like when he's on the board, it's like you kicked a goal and you got a goal influence out of it by having him on the board. On top of the fact that he's an amazing control model, and he's 5 defense with 15 hit points. We talked about strikers that average 12. He has 3 more hit points than them. And yeah, he's not a striker, but he can kick pretty well and pass pretty well, and he has some of the best control plays in the game, which really puts him up to that kind of elite level, makes him a powerful model in my eyes. Because he has that, he's just full of the X factor of like just playing against whatever your opponent's plan was. It's not that anymore once this model kind of gets in there and does its thing. So let's go through my top 3 models. And I would say that as I pointed out earlier, Gutter, definitely that. I also forgot that she is a female, which makes her really good against a lot of those charmed male characters that are very prevalent and very good, and they're strong because they get that +1 defense. Without that, though, they actually start to fall apart really quickly. Like Gutter going after Flint, who's a 3-1, like goodbye. He's essentially a 3-0. He's like a big guy, and she's just gonna go and lay into him because she has the anatomical precision. She's not even gonna get the armor from that. So that makes her even better, just all around, just everything you could want to put into like a DPS character, it's there. Other than that, what would be my next one? So I have Gutter. Gutter's definitely there. I think, actually, yeah, I think the other one would be Avarice and Greed. So Avarice, for the most part, he's actually like the good part of the duo. Like Greed is a little bit of a liability, but he has kicks, so you can pass. If you're receiving the ball, you can pass with him. But most of the time, he's gonna hide behind the goal or somewhere near Avarice, so he has 6+ defense. But Avarice himself is actually really good in the fact that he has Momentous singled out, Momentous 2-inch push. He has a knockdown on 2, so he can actually go in there and do some work for you with very minimal influence allocation. Sometimes 1 is all you need to put on him, and he can just go in there, pop a single down on the person that you want to single out for the turn, and next thing you know, you're just laying into a model with a pseudo half charges bonus, all the time, which is really, really good. I actually think Avarice is just a solid model, and neither one of them are great models themselves. But the thing that they do, and the reason that they have the X factor that they have, is it gives you 2 models for the price of 1 model slot, which gives you activation advantage. So if I'm going first, I still get the last activation. If I'm going second, I get the last 2 activations, which then makes those models link, essentially. And if you have a really good turns, you can get maybe even 3 models. And the reason that's good is because without activation, your opponent has to have your opponent has to develop the board first. And if they have to develop the board first and you have the last activations, then you kind of have the last say. Like everything's kind of set, and then you get to go in and pick it apart however you want. And you also have the last say on potentially generating momentum to see who goes first. They can't clear conditions from you when you do this. I mean, they can defensive stance and they can counterattack, but they can't heal or remove conditions during this point in time where you're going after them, which really sets up like the next turn. And that's what really leads to Avarice and Greed's power, is the activation advantage. Plus, they can be on any team, so you can take them in any guild. Now, that might be a little bit of a deterrent because, I could have Avarice and Greed. You have equal chance to have Avarice and Greed as well if you have the models. But it's also a model that I don't see a lot of players playing unless they're really, really into the tournament scene. And otherwise, it makes sense, right? Because it costs as much as the starter, essentially, to buy these guys as a model. And they're cool models, don't get me wrong. But you'll see them less just because of the investment to get them is not as great. But I think that they're up there with my top 3 most powerful models in the game because of that. And Silence probably would be my third one. Except I want to talk about a new friend that I've started to creep up in my power rankings, and that's actually Stave. So Stave is kind of going to be like the whoa, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not sure about this guy, because he has all like a really terrible drawback, which is 2 defense, 0 armor, and he has tough hide and some hit points, but like he is the momentum vending machine. Any character play you want to get off him, you can have it. But the reason I love him is I think that he is on the same level as Silence, or just about maybe just slightly behind Silence, as one of the best first turn activations in the game. If you gain advantage and Stave is on the board, or if just Stave is on the board, you have to respect him simply because of Lob Barrel. Lob Barrel is incredibly strong. You can't bunch up your units. It pushes everything that it hits 4 inches away, knocks them down, which is a big part of it as well. And so you think about if you're going first with Stave with 4 influence, he acts a lot like Silence in a way. You walk up, you have Momentous knockdown on 1, a Momentous push on 2, so you can make sure you generate 2 momentum. Then you spend your other 2 to Lob Barrel. Barrel comes in, you can knock down a group of people, and it's kind of like shutting out multiple models. It's kind of like AoE shutout. You knock them all down, and now they're in a state where they don't have momentum to stand them up, and they're pushed away and they're knocked down, so they have to go to other models. And those are the kind of plays, and these are the kind of characters that I really key in on, because they take whatever your opponent's plan was or their board state, and it tilts it in your favor. It sets up the board for yourself, which I think those kind of characters that have those abilities, like those are the powerful guild ball models in my mind. I mean, I think that it's used in cars, but in Guild Ball, I think there's no replacement for displacement. Like anything you have that can move your opponent's models to where you want them is very, very powerful. And Stave is one of the best and threatening models at doing this. And again, on the same level in my mind, probably as a silence. So that's my top three. My top three: Gutter, Avarice, and Greed, and then Stave and Silence. Close race of just kind of what they are. I'm cheating a little bit, I know. But tell me what you think. Like, what do you think about my reasoning for these models? Do you think this makes sense? Like, are there models now that you think about that you're like, oh, actually, you know what? I think this model fits. Would actually be up there with your top three, Pato, or maybe now there's a model I'm thinking about that like actually this model is really powerful and maybe it's underrated or maybe I should try this model under that reasoning. But anyways, I just hope this is at least thought provoking. And if you'd like to see more stuff like this, let me know in the comments. And maybe we'll do one that's like what do you view as the three least powerful models in the game? That's probably a definite next one. So let me know what you want to see next, because I definitely want to start making more content for Guild Ball. This stuff is kind of fun for me to talk about, and along with Octave and the Play It Pain stuff I do, I'd like to do more focused ones around questions you have. So if you also have any topics like kicking off or any basic stuff or in-depth stuff about teams or tactics or anything like that, let me know, and I'm happy. I'll make a video about it. But until then, I'll see you later.